Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we're joined by one of the most accomplished musicians in music today. This gentleman has been on the scene for over 40 years and has worked with many greats, from Dizzy Gillespie to Sonny Rollins, Betty Carter, Ron Carter, Christian McBride, Tommy Flanagan, McCoy Tyner, Melissa Manchester. I can go on and on. He's played with everyone. And to date, he's been on over 400 recordings and is still going at it. It is an honor to have him on today. He's a drummer and educator. Please welcome Mr. Lewis Nash. How are you, sir?
Very good. Thank you.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure. Well, Lewis, I'm interested in knowing more about your humble beginnings. Like I said, you've been doing this for quite a while. And as I just mentioned at the top of the show, you've played with everyone under the sun. But I'd like to know more about your humble beginnings and your background. I understand that you're from Phoenix, Arizona.
That's right. I'm here now. Yeah,
tell me about your upbringing, your family, man, how you got involved in music, because I guess I was reading somewhere that you started playing drums at 10, but tell me about early life and coming up in Phoenix, man. What was it like in the whole music scene?
Right. Well, in my house growing up here, I heard around the house everything but jazz, actually. I mean, of course, I heard everything that was on the radio, top 40 radio in those years.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about the 60s now.
Yeah.
I was born in 58. So I was actually the first baby born in a hospital in my family because prior to my birth, I have three older sisters. And those three sisters were born in Oklahoma, in a small town in Oklahoma called Tom, Oklahoma, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Both of my parents are from there.
Okay.
If you were looking at a map of Oklahoma, it's all the way in the lower right-hand corner, almost in Arkansas. It's very near where Hope, Arkansas, where Bill Clinton is from.
Mm-hmm.
That little triangular area of Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. So my three older sisters and my mother, as a matter of fact, were delivered by my great-grandmother, who was a midwife. So when my parents made the move from Oklahoma to Phoenix, I had three older sisters, and then I was the first boy and the first baby born in a hospital. So, my start began here in Phoenix, actually. So, and then the music, you're asking about my beginnings. The music I heard around the house was, of course, spirituals and church music. We were in church quite often.
Mm-hmm.
Of the time, as a matter of fact. So the music I heard at church, and then my mother would always play, have the radio station on where the gospel music was being played as well. But I also heard she was also into the blues. She introduced me to the blues. So, she was very into Lightning Hopkins, B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker, all of those people I heard of before I knew anything about jazz. That's, so the music I kind of grew up on was the gospel and spirituals, the blues that I heard, and then the soul and R&B music of the day that my older sister and everyone else was listening to on the radio. So that was kind of the stew that was brewing for me as far as musical awareness.
Yeah.
Any jazz I might have heard was incidental in those days.
What interesting. What made you choose drums of all instruments? Why drums?
I can't really answer that. What I can say is I did choose it, and I chose it, very early on, because even before I got a drum set at the age of 10, I was told that I was, pulling stuff out of the cabinets in the kitchen and surrounding myself with different sizes of pots and pans and finding whatever I could use for sticks. And I would do the same thing with different cardboard box sizes. So apparently I was doing that early on. My sisters, my siblings, and parents told me. I don't have memory of all of that necessarily. Yeah. But, so somehow there's an old saying in jazz that the instrument chooses you. You don't choose the instrument. So
interesting.
That happened with me.
Now, any of your family members, were they musicians, mom and dad, or your siblings?
No, other than occasional, singing in choir or church quartet singing or something like that, but no one chose music as a means of expression outside of that kind of thing. I was the first and only one, actually.
Interesting. One of the things that grabbed me when I was looking into your background is as you're honing your skills, getting it together, I guess by the time you're in your mid-teens, you were the man. in Phoenix, and you got a chance to play with some heavyweights like Sonny Stitt, Art Pepper, Red Garland. Incredible. I mean, playing with these giants at such a young age, I'm sure that must have blown your mind. Tell me about that, man. How did that whole thing, go down? How did you get to play with those guys?
Well, you might say, well, after what I just said, not having heard any jazz, how did you get from that?
Yeah.
Well, in that space in between, childhood and adolescence and high school and college, a lot of things happened. I was exposed to various types of music in school. I learned how to read music early on. I started playing in the school band in the 4th grade, so I started learning the basic, elementary, drumming techniques, and started learning how to read charts and music. So then when I got to high school, I joined what was called the stage band in those days. I played in the concert band. Couldn't play in the marching band because I was on the football team, but I did play in the stage band, and that's when I started learning reading drum set charts. And I still didn't really know what I was doing. And my only reference, I kind of knew what the jazz ride cymbal pattern was, the ting, ding, the ding, ding, the ding. I knew that. But beyond that, I didn't really know much else. So I would just do that to keep time. And I would have to take instruction from the band director about other things to do in terms of that, because I had no reference point historically speaking. If you named great jazz drummers or great jazz groups or anything about the history of the music to me at that time when I was in high school, I would have known nothing. I wouldn't have known the relevance or the meaning of the names like Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong. I may have heard them, but I couldn't tell you anything about them. So I was playing just on instinct, kind of. Well, which I guess must have been pretty good at that time.
Yeah, you must have been very good. One of the things that I found interesting, I guess I was reading a story where you talked about, I think it was a music teacher who asked you about, do you plan to study, or major in music or something like that? And you were like, no. And he said, I think you're making a mistake.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I was in college by that time. So, and I was my freshman year at ASU. I went to school here. I was assigned to the combo of an upperclassman, and he had said, "We're going to play the music of Miles Davis, this semester." And I guess I might have a funny look on my face because he said, "You know who Miles Davis is?" And I might have said something like, "Well, I've heard of him," or something like that. So it's very much a latecomer being a freshman in college already and not knowing a lot of stuff. But what happened was I had people around me, like the gentleman you mentioned, who he was actually a grad student at the time. His name was Charles Argersinger. He pulled me aside one time and he said, "So you're not a music major, are you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "So you don't plan on going into music as a profession?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I think you're making a mistake." So, people started to say things to me that made me reevaluate, because I was a broadcast journalism major at that time. I had been I saw that door was open. Max Robinson was kind of an influence at that time.
Max Robinson, yeah.
I'm sure you remember him. And first black anchor on network ABC. So that was kind of what I thought I was pursuing. But I love music and continued to take electives in college anyway. And so with influential people in my ear kind of saying things, I started to look deeper into the music and take recommendations of certain records to buy and people to listen to. And then I started to meet older musicians around town and establish a reputation there. So after a number of years of doing that, that's when the calls started to come for the things that you mentioned, like Sonny Stitt and Art Pepper's another one, people like that who came to town with no rhythm section, picked up local guys.
Wow.
I happened to be in the right place at the right time, I guess.
Timing. Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask you, Lewis, how did you meet and hook up with the late, great Freddie Waits? I guess who was influential in your life and really gave you some advice and I guess helped you as far as getting your gig with Betty Carter. Tell me about Freddie. And of course, his son, Nasheet Waits is a fine drummer as well. But tell me about Freddie and how you guys, hooked up and, what he meant to you.
Well, he meant quite a bit to me and always will. And of course, I ended up studying with him. How we first met was he came to Phoenix with Billy Taylor's trio.
Mm.
At that time, I think the trio was Billy Taylor, Victor Gaskin, and Freddie, if I'm not mistaken. And so I attended the performance, had a chance to meet Dr. Taylor and Mr. Gaskin and Mr. Waits. And so we established a rapport. We had a nice talk. I told him, what I did and that I played also. And he had a chance to hear me play. And based on that meeting and our subsequent kind of spending time together during his time here in Phoenix, he agreed to teach me if I could get to New York. So in the summer of 1979, I went to New York to study with Freddie. And so based on that summer, and actually that summer I had a chance to hear Max, I had a chance to hear Elvin, Art Blakey. There was a lot going on in New York in '79.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And so I had a chance to hear a lot, go to the clubs and do all of that. And so based on these continued interactions with Freddie, he felt when the word got around that Betty Carter was looking for a drummer, he felt confident recommending me based on our interactions together.
It's
word.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're thinking it's like there's so many drummers around, and they're probably like, who is this kid from young kid from Phoenix, Arizona? Why him? But obviously there was something in your playing, and I guess he felt you had the talent. But let's talk about Betty Carter, man. I mean, what was it like playing with her? Because she's like an institution in and of itself. And I've heard so many stories from musicians, from Cyrus Chestnut and others I've talked to, like, playing with her in the beginning was quite frightening because she's so demanding.
Yeah, extremely demanding.
But tell me about that. And I think one of the first gigs you played with her was Blues Alley in DC, wasn't it?
It was my very first with Betty after I joined the group was at Blues Alley. And she could be intimidating in a certain way, but what I did my best to prepare. There's only so much preparation you can do, and there's a lot to be learned on stage, of course, and in the moment. But I prepared as much as I could prior to, once Freddie had made the recommendation and she expressed an interest in hearing me play, and having me audition, I made sure that I listened to her most recent recordings. I had listened to the earlier ones, but I definitely listened to the most recent ones because that would be closer to the repertoire she'd be doing. And so I listened to all of that, and I got all of that kind of in my ear. I listened and listened and listened. I prepared myself. And I pretty much knew her current repertoire at the time. And so when I went there, as you mentioned, she had musicians in the group at the time who I'm sure probably had friends who they would have liked to have recommended or probably did recommend for the gig. When I first got there, I arrived at JFK and Betty actually came to the airport to pick me up.
Wow.
So when we went directly to her house, I went in, set up. And the guys were cordial. I won't say they were extremely warm, but they were cordial. But the thing is, once we started to play, I think that's always the determining factor. And I started to see little smiles come on their face and little nods of agreement. And after a while, we were all kind of in there. And Betty said she came up and sang a few things. And after she saw that I had prepared myself by studying her material, she was convinced, and she said, "Okay, kid." She called me kid for about 4 years. "Okay, kid, you got the gig. You have a passport? No, you better get one. We're going to Europe." Such and such.
Wow.
The first gig is next week at Blues Alley, that kind of thing.
So wasn't that at that audition? Wasn't Curtis there with you, Curtis Lundy?
And Khalid Moss.
Yeah. I remember hearing you tell that story. Curtis, fantastic bass player, and of course his sister Carmen is just tremendous. Both of. But man, that's incredible. Going out with Betty Carter, and you were young. What were you, like 20, 21 years old or something like that?
I'm about to turn 22 or just turned 22, something like that.
Ooh, wow. Would you say after playing with her, Lewis, that gig helped really open a lot of doors? Because from then on, once you left her, man, you played with like everybody. I know, like in the early 80s, 83, 84, I know you played with Ron Carter.
Right.
And you had a really tight relationship with my man Mulgrew Miller, who was very, very influential. And of course, we all miss him. Mulgrew was just tremendous. But so many people that you hooked up with, and I was just blown away when I looked at your background, I said, man, I didn't know Lewis played with this. He played with Tommy Flanagan for this long, played with Sonny Rollins. He played, I mean, you were playing with all these giants at such a young age. What would you say, looking back, I guess the early part of your career, playing with people of that caliber, and especially you're so young, what do you think you absorb most or learn from playing with giants like that at such a young age, in your career?
Well, a lot of what we learn, I'll speak for myself in particular, but I think I could speak even generally about younger musicians who join elders in the situation. We learn a lot from observing how they carry themselves on and off the bandstand. How they interact with agents, managers, uh, theater, venue proprietors and people like that, how they interact with the audience.
Yeah.
So there's definitely quite a lot to learn on the bandstand and through the music. That goes without saying. That's the reason we're there. But I just wanted to emphasize how much there is to be learned outside of that influences how we then become band leaders, business people, recording artists and everything from observing their actions and habits and things like that in terms of that. So, but in a general sense for me, these giants and masters of the music are guides in the moment. Like a lot of them, even though we would rehearse, again, there's so much that you can't really teach in a rehearsal or that can't be garnered in a rehearsal. And you have to learn on the job. And so I learned that a lot of these leaders were patient. And, imagine someone like a Tommy Flanagan who played with everyone, all the great drummers you could think of, Elvin, Max, Tony Williams, anyone, and how patient they have to be with a younger musician like myself. But I also have learned from talking to them that they have a certain kind of vision and sense about young musicians who have a certain talent and who have something to contribute. And it's not, it is a give and take. They are getting something from us. Maybe youthful energy is the most obvious thing, but we'd like to hope that our skill level and our musical acumen is such that we are offering something, to the proceedings, and it's not just, some young person being trained and all that. We hope that, there's something in our musicianship and in our expression that at least offers something valuable to the music.
Yeah. Tell me, Lewis, about Rhythm Is My Business. I believe, is that your debut recording?
That's my debut recording.
Yeah. What were you trying to say? What was your statement on that recording? What was Lewis Nash trying to say?
Let's see. I think I was saying, in a way, I was trying to say I take this seriously.
Yeah.
It's something that means a lot to me. It's while I enjoy it, it's a total involvement. I'm trying to say that kind of thing.
Yeah. Nice, man. Nice. And like I said, not just jazz, but you've played with some interesting people. Like when I saw Melissa Manchester, I'm like, really? Lewis played with Melissa? Man, what was that? What was that like working with her?
People like her. If I look back at some of my experiences with people who are kind of outside of the jazz realm necessarily, like Melissa, for example, and Willie Nelson, like that. What I find is they appreciate the same types of things that the highest level of jazz musicians would appreciate in one sense, and that is the ability to work with, to give, them something that helps them realize their musical vision. Because it's not all about you,
That's right.
As a rhythm section player, I think you learn a lot about that. Being responsible for helping to bring about a musical vision that may not necessarily be your own, but you have the will and the know-how to help someone else realize theirs. And I think those musicians who are outside that you mentioned, like you mentioned there, who are maybe not in the jazz world, appreciate that same level of commitment to the project and to their vision and high level of musicianship.
Initially when you meet people like, Dizzy Gillespie, Sonny Rollins, are you starstruck initially?
Yes.
Lewis, like, wow, oh my gosh, this is Dizzy Gillespie, one of the main, culprits. This is the guy that helped sort of put bebop together along with Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, Monk, and all these guys. Like, this is Dizzy Gillespie. What was your initial reaction? Are you like holding your sticks like, oh my gosh? Did that happen to you ever when you played with someone?
Of course it happens. I
Yeah.
mean, and I can say for sure, for example, Sonny, you mentioned Sonny. I mean, okay, I remember when he first called me, and people used to like to imitate Sonny's voice, so I thought maybe it was somebody playing a joke, but it was actually him.
Right.
And, you feel that your heart starts beating fast, and like, oh wow, this is an opportunity to do something with someone, of this caliber, and you start to see as they speak to you that they're somewhat familiar with what you've done up to that point, what little you have done. But whatever that is, they become familiar with it either through recommendation or they heard you somewhere. So I'm always telling my students, by the way, that you never know who's listening to you. And so always give it your all no matter what. But yes, meeting those people, Dizzy, for the first time and playing with them. But again, they make it known if they have a way of letting you know that you're welcome into the circle.
Mm.
May not say a whole lot, but there's certain little things that they'll, you'll realize, okay, they're accepting me into this family, into this thing, and so I'll just kind of observe and try to add what I can where I can. But the main thing for me to do is kind of observe and make sure that I'm learning as much as possible. So
Yeah.
I think those giants realize that they have a certain responsibility, and although they may have different ways of showing it, they all in some kind of way let a young musician know, okay, young person aspiring to do this, you have enough on the ball that we're going to let you on the stage with us, and we're going to help you get to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now, Lewis, also you're an educator. I know that you teach. Is that something you enjoy doing? Are you still? I know you're on the faculty at Juilliard. Are you still doing that?
No, I was for a while, but that's been a while back that I
Okay.
on that faculty anymore.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I was on the very first jazz faculty at Juilliard. That was 2001.
2001.
Right after the the World Trade Center incident happened, and we didn't know what was going to happen after that. But
Yeah.
2001 at Juilliard. But now I'm on the faculty here at Arizona State University in the Jazz Studies department, and that's working out really well.
Fantastic, fantastic. Let me ask you this. Like I said, I think you're one of the finest drummers out there. And of course, you've played with so many different people. Who would you say more than anyone? And of course, there's probably a lot of drummers, but who would you say you pattern yourself after? Who's been maybe the most influential drummer, in your life? If you could take maybe one or a couple of drummers and say, you know what, that guy was the one that really made me want to, go to the next level.
That's so hard to do, Preston. I mean, I don't really think I could say one because I know what I got from each one of the guys whose name I would say. I could pare it down to 3, maybe 4. 3. Well, I'll put it like this. The first recordings I heard that I really started to really study the style of modern jazz drumming had the drummers Art Blakey, Philly Joe Jones, and Max Roach. Now, those 3, just because they were at the very beginning of my kind of deep dive into what it means to do this, I think that means they have a special place. But if I only limited to them, it would be leaving out Roy Haynes, who to me had a certain kind of daring and boldness about his playing and that I liked.
Yeah.
And
so, snack, crackle, pop.
Yeah. And then I would be leaving out Elvin, who I didn't know of as well at that time, but later on came to know, and just his kind of energy that he played with and all that. So those names that I just named, I guess, that's five guys, right?
That's fine. There's another one that constantly keeps coming up. I probably hear his name more than anyone is Tony Williams.
Right.
I constantly hear Tony. Everybody talks about, Four and More, Seven Steps to Heaven, those recordings.
Just
but
velocity, that part, But
yeah.
I will say this though, even though it came later and it wasn't part of my awareness early on, once I got older and more involved in the music, I realized how important Joe Jones was.
Oh, yeah. Papa Joe Jones.
Yeah, because the whole way he plays defines how modern drumming evolved. He's already playing like that. Even though he moved time from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal, he was primarily playing on the hi-hat early on, but it was as if he knew all along, that same sound and that same feeling that he created on the hi-hat happened on the ride cymbal, and that same, kind of joyful, grooving spirit that he had carried over into more modern ways of playing. So to me, he's really kind of the father of modern drumming. Then Kenny Clark after that.
Kluk. Yeah, Kluk. Interestingly enough, when I saw you last week on Sunday, you and I talked about a drummer. I think you brought a drummer's number. I think it was it Ed Thigpen?
Ed Thigpen.
Thigpen, yeah. You mentioned him, and that's a name we don't hear about a lot these days. But he was a very fine drummer. And did you ever get a chance to meet him or?
I knew Ed very well. Matter of fact, I remember one of the last times I saw him, he was sitting in the wings at a drum master class I was giving for Percussive Arts Society, I think it was, or jazz. I forget what it was, one of the conventions. But that's my son. But a great educator as well, Ed was. And his recordings with the Oscar Peterson Trio are classic, among many others that he did. And so I really feel indebted to him, too, as far as being inspirational to me and also being encouraging in person to continue with educating and the things I was doing in my career. So very much a part of my life, I think.
Yeah. Lewis, if I came over to your house right now and just sat down with you, man, and we kicked it, just maybe had a glass of wine or a meal, and I'm like, Lewis, what are you listening to right now? What are you playing? If I were to come over to your house, what is Lewis Nash listening to? Because I see the music in the background there.
That would change from day to day, Preston. I mean, and I sometimes I'm in a particular mood of checking out a certain thing. My listening kind of goes like this. I listen to my favorites often. So that might be something, with, one of the giants like Bird or Dizzy or Train or the MJQ, for example. I really enjoy that. It might be something like that. Or sometimes I specifically will make sure that I keep an ear open for what younger players today are doing, just so I keep an ear to it. And, kind of keep my ear abreast of what's going on in the present moment. So that's kind of what I do, but the classics will always find their way. I'll be listening earlier today, I was listening to Arnett Cobb. I was listening to Gene Ammons. So I keep those things kind of in my audible, kind of circle. But I'm always trying to make sure that I keep up on what's going on now.
Yeah. Have you ever written anything like film score or composed anything like for a film?
I have not done that, but that's quite a skill in and of itself, as you know, to do something like that. But there's ways of doing those things that maybe not in the traditional way of composing, the way someone like Terrence Blanchard or Spike Lee often use Terrence for his stuff. But that kind of traditional film composing. But there's also could be a more creative, improvised type of situation. So there's a lot of possibilities of creating soundtracks to film. So I'm totally open to it. But I don't consider myself a composer per se in that sense. Doing that kind of stuff. That's a pretty high level skill to do that.
We talk about all these drummers from Art Blakey, Max Roach, Joe Jones, Elvin, Tony, Billy Cobham, and you're a part of that history, man. You're one of those cats. Like I said, I've looked at your background. I've known you for a long, long time. And as I said, some of the greatest musicians. I mean, I was just the pianist. I can just say, look at Lewis's, background and just look at the musicians he's played with, but just look at the pianist for one. I'm like Oscar Peterson, McCoy Tyner, Hank Jones, Tommy Flanagan. I mean, that there alone, that's pretty impressive. But it's just amazing the people that you played with. And like I said, when I saw you on Sunday, as I mentioned before I even started the program, I was very, very impressed because I've seen basically every drummer. I love drummers, and because they drive the band, and you were driving that band on Sunday. Your cymbal work, everything you were doing, how you talked about Papa Joe Jones, how he would, move and dance around the instrument. That's basically what you were doing. And I'm watching. I said, look at this cat. I saw Lewis about 5-6 years ago, and I guess it was a little different, when you play with McCoy Tyner, but you were really free on Sunday. And I says, I've never seen you play like that before. And I was like, wow. Even when I left Keystone Corner, we were talking about you. I said, man, Lewis is a bad cat. I said, that guy.
Really do think I appreciate you for saying that, but I really do think I felt like I was finally able to.
Yeah.
And after a year and a half or more of not really being able to do it, I finally felt like I was kind of coming out of a shell.
Yeah, man. Tell me about your friend, Steve Wilson. I know you guys are buddies. Steve's been on the program before. And also, there's a lot of guys that come to my mind. Your buddy, Carl Allen. I guess you guys have some type of sports thing going back and forth. Carl's been on the show, too, so I know about that. But tell me about Steve. How'd you guys meet? And I know you guys have worked together. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with him and playing with him, because he's a fantastic musician and has worked with so many greats. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I played on Steve's very first, I think it was his first recording as a leader on Crisscross.
Yeah.
Records. I'm trying to think of the name of it now. For some reason, it's escaping me. I apologize for that. But anyway,
okay.
there's a picture of him with his son, his young son on the cover. Blues for Marcus, maybe that's the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, we met back in it would have been probably the late 80s, I'm guessing now. But he came up to New York not too many years after I arrived there, and he, along with I think Billy Drummond, a very good friend of ours as well, came up around the same time. And we've had an opportunity to play in different situations together. And then eventually we decided to play together as a duo. I had an idea of doing it. I'd done it before with other musicians, and I was trying to think of who would be a good duo partner. And I thought about Steve and called him up, and he was interested. And so we've done it for a number of years now. I guess it's over 10 years, maybe.
Wow.
I can't even count now. I don't remember, but and we have a really, kind of a great affinity for playing in that format.
Mm-hmm.
Done it at various festivals around the world and made a few recordings. So we actually look forward to getting back together again and doing it again soon.
Now, yeah, oh yeah, Steve is a bad cat. What's next for Lewis Nash? Are we going to hear any new music, maybe any new recordings, stuff? Because I know, like, of course, you're always gigging and working with different musicians, but any new music of your own that we may be seeing possibly this year or next year?
Definitely by next year. I'm working on some stuff now, some new ideas. We always keep ideas close at hand.
Yeah.
I have file drawers full of ideas of various things. So I'm working on, I'm starting to sing a bit more now. So I'm starting to work on.
Whoa, stop for a second. You sing, man?
Yes, I do. Lewis,
I didn't know you sang. Are you serious?
Yeah.
So that was you that I heard on that Earth, Wind, and Fire album a long time.
Well, I can remember the days when I used to play for dances and I was singing Brick House and Easy.
Oh, wow.
It's a little different than that, but You know,
That's great, man. I didn't know that you sang. That's fantastic. I look forward to that. Are you planning on doing this on your next recording, singing a little more? And
probably,
is it more jazz oriented, or you doing
yeah,
pop or R&B or?
jazz oriented. And so then
Okay.
I'm probably going to do a vocal project coming up soon. Um,
Oh wow.
I like singing, you know, I like storytelling. That's one of the reasons I've always loved playing with vocalists because they're storytellers.
Oh yeah.
You know, so
I look forward to hearing this, man. Wow.
I
This is I'm gonna hold you to that now that I know where you are now. I'm gonna be checking every few months. Is that recording out yet, man? Are you singing, you know? But no, that's great. But listen, man, I want to thank you so much for being on Jazz Talk today. You're a class act, love you, and just please continue, making this beautiful music that you're doing, playing with all these great musicians. And like I said, it was such a humbling experience to finally see you out Sunday of last week because it had been a number of years. I think, as I said, the last time I caught you was with McCoy and Gary Bartz at Blues Alley about 5-6 years ago. So you guys were on fire, but thank you so much. Hang on, I'm about to close out the show. Well, you've heard it from the great Lewis Nash. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.